Similar to what Pete was talking about is, that cost and benefits. That is one of the frustrating things was, initially to hear Matt Byfield coming to our area, public meeting at the Great Lakes Visitor Center, and why the Penokees, why now? Because we're new, we're different, we're going to use safe, new technology. We're going to create 700 jobs. How do you create 700 jobs? Oh, well, we looked at the ancient mines that have been operating 35 years and have taken decades to build up to the manpower levels that they are, and we took a comparable estimate of the jobs that are created. So, I was listening that night at home on the radio, and I thought, so Matt, you're new, you're different, you're not like the mines of Minnesota, but your job comparison is pulled exactly from the mines of Minnesota. I'm like, and I registered it as double talk right off the get-go. But there's a whole other, the whole other aspect of it too is the earth economics of it. From a perspective of what is the value of all of that cold, clean groundwater that is contributing a massive plume of clean, cold water to Lake Superior in the context of things like climate change and water scarcity and stuff like that that are going on and on the way. When you think of the Great Lakes, as we all know, having a fever, Lake Superior was identified as probably the fastest warming of the Great Lakes. There's a whole plethora of impacts from fisheries, commercial fisheries, to fisheries for human consumption, to all of that stuff that comes into play when you think of the big lake having a fever. When you look at the Bad River watershed as an example from an earth economic standpoint, can we quantify in terms of money how much the umpteen trillion gallons a day of cold, clean water that's pouring off of the Penokee Hills and down through the filtration system that is the watershed and out into Lake Superior, cooling down those trout fisheries and all of the fisheries that essentially are the Kakagan sloughs and tributaries around our area. Can we put a price on that stuff? And there are some actually new entrepreneurial efforts that are getting into the business of doing just that, putting a price and really quantifying what that type of stuff means. But for us, it's that unspoken, never discussed, never even philosophized part of the price that we're supposed to pay in this area without ever really thinking about it, without ever really talking neighbor to neighbor about what does this mean for us. And part of that, is obviously the destruction of Class A trout streams. Pete may have showed you this map right here. This is from the feds, and it shows the St. Louis watershed, and it shows the Bad River watershed of the one we're talking about right here. All impaired waters, exceptional and outstanding water resource, streams, lakes, and creeks. The biggest thing about this that is also an unspoken is having been around since the beginning when Byfield came in, double talking and stuff. I've recognized that there's some talking points that you don't hear anymore out of Republican legislators and or Bill Williams from GTAC. When they first came in, one of the big things was talking about the creation of a northern Wisconsin mining district. And I think because of the public opinion and the fact that they're talking about northern Wisconsin community members' homes and impacts into their way of life, a high quality way of life, lived on shorelines and lakes and streams and stuff, they've dropped that whole notion of mining district because it begs the question of, what do you mean mining district? How many mines are you going to have, and how close are you going to be together, and how are those impacts going to extrapolate on top of each other if you're in the same watershed? Those kinds of questions automatically come to mind. So that talking point, the mining district talking point's fallen away. Another one that's fallen away is Bill Williams just came in riding a horse of, hey, the solution to pollution is dilution. And we go down to Madison and talk to these Republican legislators that would just kind of glaze over, and they'd say that. They'd say, hey, the solution to pollution is dilution. You got the big lake right there. And there's a really interesting reason, I think, of why that's fallen off the way and fallen to the wayside as a Republican and I'll stay out of politics, but as a mining company talking point, is because when you look at the Vancouver watershed, the proximity of GTAC's mining project to Lake Superior, we'll just say is 20 miles, right? 20 miles, and thus Bill Williams saying, hey, there's an easy solution. Our toxicity is going to get into the big lake very quickly, very efficiently. Before you know it, it's there. And once it gets there, it's diluted, no problem, right? When you look at the St. Louis watershed, you're looking at mining impacts over the course of a drainage filtration system that is the watershed. That is what, 60 to maybe even 100 miles in some cases? And you can still see a history and a result that is toxicity based, you know. There's a reason all these waters are labeled impaired, and they're impaired on mercury and other contaminants. But that drainage system from those mining projects all the way to Lake Superior is over the course of not 20 miles, but a much longer distance. And yet the impacts are very, very easy to see. And if I look at it from an old Indian set of eyes, you know, I'm always drawn to that wild rice dead zone that is the St. Louis River estuary that used to be an ancestral place for the harvesting of wild rice. There's no wild rice there. It's related to the sulfate pollution from these projects. Well, we go back to that solution to pollution's dilution. That was predicated on the fact that the poisons from the mine site are going into Lake Superior very quickly, very efficiently, to the point where the pollution problem, at least in a mining engineer's mind, wasn't going to be a big deal because our footprint's going to be in Lake Superior so quickly. You know, you couldn't possibly have to worry about that because the lake is so big. And you can understand why that's probably not a talking point GTAC wants to trumpet anymore. And it calls to mind one other thing. And just from an Earth economic standpoint, you know, all of these mining projects that are around Lake Superior, if we put the map up on the wall, and I see a map, there's a little red triangle for every mining project around Lake Superior. As one of my elders said one time, you can see a noose. You can see a noose. Every watershed, maybe with the exception of our watershed here in our home, you and me as residents up here, the watersheds are all full of mining projects. The interesting thing about those mining projects is as they go to get permitted, they're permitted as though they're the only mining project in the world. We don't have to talk, and GTAC won't talk about their pollution as being a part of an industry that is all draining into Lake Superior. So Bill Williams can say things like the solution to pollution is dilution. Our mine is going to produce that much pollution, right? What he won't tell you, and none of these industry folks will talk about, is the fact that